Welcome, everybody. This is John Tare. I'm President and CEO of the Boulder Chamber, and I welcome you to this very important and much anticipated webinar to discuss the seating outdoor procedures for restaurants and also the procedures for retail as well. I know that this comes at an exciting time for all of us as we have the opportunity to reopen our restaurants and start to develop the procedures for inside seating, as well as the opportunity for outdoor seating. So I'm not going to spend much more time, but I'm only going to say that I appreciate greatly the work of the City of Boulder staff team as they developed very quickly the procedures to allow for the opportunity for outdoor seating in various right-of-way and potentially on streets as well. And I know that there's going to be a lot of questions about the process, but I know that they are going to be up to the task of helping us to walk through that today, their initial process, and to answer your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Charles Farrow, who is the head of the City of Boulder's Economic Recovery Task Force, and just thank him for helping to lead the charge in this initial webinar and in the process that we're about to learn about. So take it away, Charles.
Thank you so much, John. I'm going to pop off camera so that my computer doesn't get super slow.
Yep.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. I'm Charles Farrow. As John said, I'm the Development Review Manager at the city, and I'm also serving as the city's Economic Recovery Coordinator for the time being. So I'll be speaking with you today about our brand new temporary outdoor seating area program for restaurants, as well as a few other things that we have in the works to help support the broader business community in Boulder. So I guess I'd start by saying that, to John's point, this has been a really rapid process that's been evolving really quickly. So our application, our checklist, and our FAQ are being finalized as we speak. We plan to launch them this evening, so I won't be able to walk you through the application in detail this afternoon, but I certainly can describe the process, standards, review timelines, and I'll try to be as brief as possible because I suspect that there's probably going to be some questions this afternoon. And my slide won't advance. There we go. Apologies. So as you may have heard from discussions with council or in the paper, we've had a staff team working diligently on establishing a temporary program to allow for additional outdoor seating on both public and private property. Our intent has really been to create a low-cost option for restaurants with minimal requirements for outdoor seating that helps to encourage social distancing and honors the most recent guidance that's been provided by the state over the weekend. And finally, we wanted to champion a simple, streamlined online permitting process with a detailed checklist, comprehensive FAQs that are really as prescriptive as possible. And again, they'll go live this evening. With regard to eligibility, all licensed restaurants in all zones in the City of Boulder would be eligible to use the city's right-of-way, including on-street parking, sidewalks, alleys adjacent to your restaurant. Per the state, the city has also waived all of our minimum parking requirements, so all privately owned parking areas would be eligible as well. Per the state's recent guidance, bars and other restaurants that are not licensed retail food establishments with kitchens will be considered in June. So while this program doesn't directly impact food trucks, we're going to use our orders to allow them to operate in residential zones in addition to the industrial zones that they're allowed to operate in currently. Food trucks would still be precluded from operating downtown and in mixed use and other commercial zones throughout the city. With regard to fees, we've waived all city application fees. If you have a liquor license and you intend to modify it to accommodate additional outdoor seating, the state has reduced their fee from $300 to $150. We're waiving our $50 fee for modifications. The process will be completely online. We've created, like I said, a very simple application and a detailed checklist as well as comprehensive FAQs. The window for applications will begin tomorrow, May 27th, and will run through June 30th. The program will conclude on September 30th. Our reviews will take no longer than 3 days, with inspections to occur very quickly thereafter to ensure compliance. Applications for liquor license modifications will occur concurrently over that 3-day period. But I want to be very clear, we're not asking you to wait for inspections or formal approvals. The construct here is really that you submit your application, you acknowledge compliance with the standards, and you go get set up. An inspector will be out shortly to help ensure compliance and issue a certification of compliance. Inspectors will be working with you on site in real time in a socially distanced way to resolve issues on site. We really want to get you up and running, so you don't need to wait 3 days for formal approval. You're going to acknowledge compliance when you apply and you can get to work. If you are modifying your liquor license, you will need to wait until the actual license is approved before you can start serving alcohol. I think Michonne can speak to that in a little bit more detail. With regard to outdoor seating, design, and operations, like I said, the state's guidance that came out over the weekend really provides super detailed recommendations for things like table spacing, occupancy, communal seating. So we're asking that you abide by those recommendations. We've established some additional standards that are meant to be very flexible and encourage very simple outdoor seating elements that don't require separate building permits. And I really want to emphasize that simplicity. We're suggesting the use of things like removable tables, chairs, and umbrellas, rugs and artificial turf, temporary barriers of all kinds like pallets, movable planters, temporary fencing and railings. You can also have low wattage ornamental lighting and outdoor music. The city even has a program that can connect you with a local artist so that you can make your temporary barriers a little bit more engaging and beautiful. Outdoor seating areas would be allowed to operate until 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and until 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, as well as on federal holidays. So, of course, there's a little bit of fine print. Outdoor seating areas with regard to operation will need to be used for sit-down dining only. No yard games, no movies. We're asking that you don't build any elaborate structures or decking that would require separate permits. That will also add time and cost to your project. We're asking that you keep storm drain inlets, drain pans, valve boxes, and manholes free of obstructions, that you don't obstruct the right-of-way with extension cords across sidewalks or parking lots. Tents and canopies will be permitted, but there are some size limitations that we've laid out in our FAQs. You'll need to have proof of insurance. In some cases, you'll need permission from a property owner, potentially adjacent property owner. We're asking that you don't use any sort of outdoor heat sources, no outdoor grills, heaters, candles. Then we have some standards around ensuring that our fire hydrants aren't obstructed. So all of that will be covered in detail in the FAQ and our checklist. I wanted to share just some sample imagery to really highlight the simplicity of these outdoor seating areas. Again, all very easily removable structures, planters, as well as carpeting and use of synthetic turf. Here's a few more examples that are kind of more cafe seating style out in the right of way. Here are some parking lots that are being repurposed to allow for socially distanced dining. A few more examples. And then on the lower left-hand corner, you'll see there's some of that mural art that a local artist could provide for you if you're interested. So we recognize that restaurants in Boulder are really important to the city's economy, so we knew that we had to act quickly in this case. We have another initiative in the works that's designed to help support all business in Boulder and help them recover quickly. So we're referring this to as our Business First initiative. We know that office, retail, and other types of commercial businesses will need to make changes to their operations as well as their buildings to respond directly to COVID-19. So these are things like changes to entryways and vestibules for wellness checks, walk-up service windows, ventilation improvements, modified office spaces and floor plans to help support social distancing in the new normal, as well as other tenant finish work. So to support that, we're recommending that we suspend permitting compliance triggers for things like landscaping and lighting that add time and expense to what should be quick reviews. We're also recommending that we relax some of our discretionary processes for things like minor modifications and other administrative processes that can add time and cost. So we plan to do this by creating a new set of screening criteria to ensure that these types of projects are indeed necessary to respond directly to COVID-19. These projects would be routed on their own track. They would be reviewed quickly by a cross-departmental team with one point of contact from start to finish. We plan to do so on a very abbreviated timeline. Our goal is to get building permit reviews for these types of projects down to 7 days. So we plan to complete the implementation and rollout of this very soon. We're not ready to go live just yet, but I wanted to put it on everybody's radar, and we'll certainly know when we're ready to roll this out. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Let's hold off questions and let Ms. Shawn talk, and then we'll do all the questions at one time.
Great.
And we lost her. So let's go ahead and ask some questions while she's logging back in. Let's start with a question about, I think this is just a clarification question. Does this include City of Longmont and Niwot or just Boulder?
No, this is just relevant to the City of Boulder.
Okay. Another question that has come in, and this might be something that Lane Drager from Boulder County Public Health can answer, and that is a little bit about entertainment. What does the state order talk about entertainment, and how do you need to follow some social distancing and other safety precautions in that entertainment?
Sure. The current order does not address that at all, so it does not prohibit outdoor entertainment. I think what it does, though, is requires social distancing. So I think if you have outdoor areas and you provide entertainment, you just need to make sure you've carved out adequate space, that entertainment is socially distant from all your patrons as well as the patrons from each other. I think the other big piece is to think about how you're going to allow access for the indoor portion of your facilities if you're expanding out in front of the businesses. And then I think the other piece is making sure that adjacent businesses are not obstructed or there's not deterrence for folks there. And then again, the bigger piece is that pedestrian movement along Pearl Street in those areas is viable so that they can socially distant and people aren't gathering or congregating to listen to music outside of the adjacent seating area.
Thank you. So Charles, we have quite a few questions about this. Are there any confirmed road closures in downtown Boulder?
Well, I think last week, council asked us to make some considerations about closures on West Pearl, East Pearl, on 13th between College and Pleasant, I believe, as well as the city's event street on University Hill. So I think council's going to have another discussion tonight, and I think we should have a little bit more clarity this evening on recommended street closures.
Is there a way to ask for a street to be closed in their application?
I believe there is. Transportation has a number of standards that they would look at to make a determination as to whether or not a street would be closed.
Okay. In the application, does the process require or ask businesses to consult with neighboring businesses before proceeding with outdoor extensions?
In most cases, no. Really, the construct is that you use the, if you're talking about the right-of-way, like a Pearl Street example, you would use the space that's immediately adjacent to the frontage of your building. In situations where you're on private property, I think of something like Table Mesa or Basemar, if you wanted to utilize a parking area that's shared amongst a number of businesses, we're going to ask that you get the landlord's approval to make sure that everybody's in agreement with how that shared parking would be used for outdoor seating.
Okay. Would permitted spaces only apply to those connected directly to your restaurant? Or could we use neighboring sidewalks, other empty spaces that aren't directly applied to your area?
So in most cases, like I said, we're asking that you use the areas that are immediately adjacent to your frontage of your business. So that can be the sidewalk as well as, you know, any parking that is immediately in front of your business. If you have a next door neighbor that isn't interested in using their parking area and you want to seek permission from them, that could be reviewed through the application as well.
Okay, and I see Michonne's back on, so we'll take a break on the questions and let her talk a little bit about the liquor licensing process. Michonne, do you want to do that?
Yes, I apologize about that. I was having technical difficulties and I may not turn on my video as a result of it, just to make sure that you can hear me. So I'm Michonne Cook. I'm the licensing manager with the City of Boulder, and I know many restaurateurs across the City of Boulder. So, for city licensing's part, the starting point for applying for one of these temporary modifications to expand into outdoor seating area will be the link that Charles has already discussed. So you'll fill out that information so that the city knows what you're applying for. And then if you are expecting or want to have alcohol service in that expanded area and you already have an existing liquor license, then you will come to us. So for temporary modifications, we have made changes both to our checklist and via city emergency rules in order to add liquor licensing into expanded outdoor areas. So for us, it's a pretty simple 5-step process. As Charles mentioned, we are waiving the $50 fee. So if you mailed us a $50 check, we'll just shred it and tear it up, and we will waive the fee. The state, however, is not waiving their $150 fee. So the process for temporary modifications will be this. In that location on the main COVID-19 webpage, you will go in, you'll fill out the information about the modification that you want to make, the expansion that you want to make. Then you'll click the link for temporary modifications of liquor licenses. And then that will take you to a page that explains the state required application process, including checklist. So you can apply online. If you file your documents via our CSS application portal, that's fine. You can also email those to us if you feel more comfortable with that. Don't send us the $50 fee, but look at the checklist and you'll have to fill out the state application, the before diagram, the after diagram. You'll need to include a permission letter from the property owner. If it's on city property, the resulting, the city will take care of essentially getting the permission from the city. So you don't have to worry about that because you've already filed to expand in the way that you want. But if you're expanding into a private parking lot or onto, some sort of main plaza or something, you will need a letter of permission from your landlord. Include that in the application and then file it with us. Once we receive a legally complete application, the State Liquor Enforcement Division is accepting state fees via online payment. So you want to do that pretty much immediately after you file with us. And once we have a legally complete application, we're going to tell you what else we need. We're going to send you an email with what else we need. And we also are going to email you a poster that you then print and put up on your front door glass or front window glass. Changed via city emergency rule, so that it's a 3-day posting period. So if you file with me today, it takes me an hour to look at the application. I'm going to respond back to you via email and say, I need these 2 other things, and here's your poster. Print it, put it up. If you put up the poster today, then we count 3 days, 3 calendar days from the posting. If you start it today, then that would be Friday. Your posting would be over. We would send you an affidavit of posting that said, did you put up the poster? Did it stay up for 3 days? You send that back to us. We locally approve the application and we email it down to the State Liquor Enforcement Division. Now, the State Liquor Enforcement Division has promised that they're going to put these at the top of the stack. And thus far, from other cities and towns, they've said that they are processing these. The State Division is processing these anywhere between 24 to 48 hours. So it's taken them about 2 days, which is really fast for the state, quite honestly. So the things that you can do to make it go faster is follow our checklist, give us everything that we need the first time, because we want our applications to be on the top of the stack when they go down to the state. Don't want the state to have to say, hey, I need dimensions on this diagram, or I require something else. We want a clean application so that the state can approve it and move on with the next one. So in our checklist is pretty good and pretty detailed. Please use it because we absolutely want to get these processed as quickly as we can for you all. So.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple questions that I think between you and Charles, we'll be able to get some of these answered. On the latest checklist, it appears that for private property, city licensing will obtain the necessary letter from zoning and that applicants do not need to do anything with zoning. Is that accurate?
That is true. Yes, that is true. Planning and zoning is going to give us what we need that will satisfy the state's requirements. We're going to grab that, add it to the application, and ship it to the state. So you don't have to worry about that. You would need the permission letter from the property owner that says, yeah, it's okay with me if this liquor licensee expands in the way that they want. But the state, the city departments are going to talk to each other and get that piece of the information. So.
Thank you. So regarding restaurants that don't already have a liquor license, are there going to be relaxed rules for new applications? Who do we contact? Is there something that they should know if they don't already have a liquor license and they'd like to increase their revenue over the summer?
So city licensing is still accepting new liquor license applications. We're still holding beverage licensing authority hearings. We're virtually via remote means, and we're still approving new liquor licenses. For new liquor licenses, though, the thing that you have to know, city has changed little things as far as the ways that we do needs and desires petitioning and those things in order to accommodate remote hearings. But it still is the case in the state liquor code that we can't hold a hearing less than 30 days from when we receive a new liquor license application. It's in code and it remains unamended. So the state hasn't done anything surrounding around that. From my concept, brand new liquor licenses, which require petitioning, background checks, a BLA hearing, all of those types of things are sort of separate and apart from this process that we're talking about as far as temporary modifications of already existing liquor licenses. So.
Thank you. So Charles, I believe this question's for you. Can we offer up right-of-way space on Pearl Street to non-Pearl Street businesses if we have space? For example, tented restaurant offerings from those not originally on Pearl.
So I don't know that our program accounted for that. I think really the construct is to help support businesses expand outdoor seating opportunities immediately adjacent to their businesses.
And also from a liquor licensing perspective, if you look at the change, alter, modify emergency rule that the state passed, there's specific constraints. There's no such thing as like a satellite liquor license. And so it it would need to be in relative close proximity if you intend to serve and sell alcohol. And the only separating sort of piece of real estate in between the indoor restaurant that already has a liquor license and the outdoor space really would need to be pedestrian only. You need to have an easement. It needs to have pretty close proximity related to it, having to do with the state regs. So.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers that question. But is it okay, if it's okay with your neighbors, can you use sidewalks in front of them as well?
Yes.
And is that close enough proximity, Michonne, for them to extend their liquor license that far?
Yeah, I mean, close proximity means it needs to be in the same adjacency, and it can't be, you can't be driving cars through it, or there can't be some sort of vehicle traffic which separates the main restaurant from the satellite area where the outside seating area and where the alcohol service will happen. So.
Okay. So for the streets that are determined to be closed, are you going to be able to use the street area, including traffic lanes and on-street parking, or just particular parts of those closed streets?
Well, I may defer to Sarah Webenson on this one, but my understanding is that on a closed street, the center 20 feet has to remain clear for emergency access. And then the either adjacencies could be used for outdoor seating opportunities. But that 20 feet in the center would need to be maintained clear for emergency vehicles.
Okay. Charles, will you review again the timeline on when this is going to, when the application is going to go live, where it's going to be on the website? We had a couple questions come in even after you went through it.
We are hoping to have it live as soon as humanly possible. I guess worst case scenario would be later this evening. We'll have links from the city's main page, and we'll, kind of get it out to, folks in every, possible way. But we will have links from the city's main webpage, the Planning and Development Services page.
Great. And I will send up a follow-up email to anybody registered for this or some of the other restaurant calls with direct links to both the liquor license modifications as well as the application for the right-of-way.
Yeah, we'll definitely communicate that out to all of our partner agencies in town.
So Michonne, can you combine locations, liquor licenses in these modifications if two neighboring locations have a beer and wine license that they can both sell? No?
No, the State Liquor Enforcement Division is kind of going down the temporary modification of individual liquor licenses path instead of the common consumption commingling liquor licenses path. That's what I heard when clerks talked to the state last Wednesday. There were several lobbyists and advocacy organizations which they were asking for several different things, but it seemed pretty clear that the State Liquor Enforcement Division was going down that path. So if you wanted to modify your own liquor license and add 1,200 square feet outdoors, that you would need to do a temporary modification, you'd need to have containment, and you'd need to be prepared to speak to and include a narrative about the way that you would control that new square footage, the way that it would have proper control under an expanded portion of your liquor license. So that's the way that they elected to do it. That's not to say that that couldn't change, and if state rules and regs were changed to allow commingling of licenses, then maybe the city of Boulder would look at it, but this is what we're doing now because this is what we heard from the state. So
to be clear, there has to be a designated end of one facility and the start of
Yes.
another one.
Yes, those two liquor licensees would need to, cooperate in some manner. You're going to take 50% and I'm going to take 50%, and here's my 3-foot containment fence, and there's yours over there, and you're going to run your tables and I'm going to run my tables. So, yeah.
Okay. What about back alleys? Do we need to have 20 foot for emergency vehicles, or can we close alleys for a certain time?
It is possible to utilize alleys. I think they would need to be closed to allow for emergency vehicles to actually get back there. What was the second part of the question?
Whether or not they could use back alleys, close them, and if they would need the 20 feet for emergency vehicles.
Yeah, they would be able to use them as long as they're not adjacent to, immediately adjacent to one of our interfacing residential neighborhoods. But yeah, they could be used.
Okay. We have a question about retailers. How do retailers take advantage of this? Can we request parking spots to be used for pickup?
Well, again, the construct of the program was really about restaurants, but if you have parking that's immediately adjacent to your shop, or for example, if you're a retailer on Pearl Street and you have a 50-foot storefront and you have 50 feet up, out in front of your building, you can still utilize that for, for parking purposes. So maybe not explicitly, but yeah, you don't have to use the area in the front of your building for outdoor seating if you don't want to. It's optional.
So Lane, just to pile onto that a little bit about the retailers, they'll probably have to keep in mind some of the retail health protocols if they were to extend outside, including people touching their goods and the making sure those are wiped clean and all of that stuff. How does it apply also to the health codes?
We don't license retail sales like we do retail food. So there isn't a public health piece there outside of those requirements under Safer at Home for retailers that you already pointed out. So I think it would just be making sure that there's easy access for people, those other adjacent businesses, to still have, not have congregation, where now we have less walking space. So I think that's the other piece, is making sure that that 20-foot emergency space on any streets that are closed is still adequate for the foot traffic for people to be socially distant.
And then, since I have you on the spot, Lane, we have a question about the state order having to do with the 50 patrons or 50% max capacity, whichever is lower. Is that for indoor, or does that include the outdoor piece as well?
Yeah, we're seeking clarification on that. That was something that was not in their original draft. There wasn't a cap, and now there is. So we're trying to establish, does that just apply to indoor, or is there an additional cap for outdoor, or is it just based on social distancing caps? So we're trying to find that clarification from the state.
And once we have that clarification, we promise the restaurants to pass that information along as soon as possible. A lot of this came out yesterday, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Michonne, I think there's a little bit of a confusion about if you don't already have a beer and liquor license or a beer and wine license. If a restaurant doesn't already have one, they cannot simply apply for a temporary license to use throughout the summer, including the COVID period. No? No,
there is no such thing as a for-profit temporary liquor license according to the state liquor code. The closest thing as a one-day liquor license is a special event liquor permit, and those are only available to nonprofit organizations. Quite honestly, even if it were the case that a for-profit restaurant wanted to partner with a nonprofit so that the nonprofit, could apply for a special event liquor permit or some such, there wouldn't be a lot of benefit, quite honestly, to the restaurant, because the profits and proceeds from the sale and service of alcohol have to go to the nonprofit organization. So it really is the case that, if you want a liquor license, definitely apply. We're taking applications, all of that type of thing. But realistically, getting a brand new liquor license, start to finish, a permanent license, 2 months is really, really cooking for a time frame to obtain a permanent liquor license. So.
Okay, thank you. So regarding the adjacent restaurants conversation, can both restaurants claim to share the same outdoor space with their modified liquor licenses? Or do there
No.
need to be a barrier between? So there needs to be a
There
barrier.
would need to be a barrier and separate designated square footage that's specified both in the after diagram and in the control plan. Because unless the state division amends more things in the state liquor code than they have, the way that liquor licenses work is they don't overlap. There are very few instances in the state liquor code where control, responsibility, and service of liquor licenses are allowed to overlap. So it would be the case that in that scenario, you know, you'd have 50% and you'd have 50%, you have a 3-foot fence or planters, you know, whatever you have around that outdoor area, and those are your tables, those are your customers, mine are over here. So
Okay. Now, Lane, if we have two restaurants butting up to each other and they both want to use outdoor space, there needs to be 6 feet between their tables on the edge of their spaces without a physical wall, correct?
Yeah, they need to maintain 6 feet from adjacent patrons. So the tables potentially need to be even further than 6 feet to accommodate that. So they would just need to make sure that different dining groups are at least 6 feet apart.
Okay, and this might be for you as well. Can we allow for food prep outside? I don't know if that has to do anything with their food license.
Yeah, that would definitely start to impact your license. I believe there is something in the Safer at Home that's prohibiting some of those actions on it. But it would need to comply with the retail food requirements. So if you're not already permitted for that outdoor food preparation, then you would need to potentially go through our office to get that approved. So we would need to look at what you're trying to do.
Okay, thank you. So Charles, I have another question for you. So people want clarification on how they use the parking spaces directly in front of their restaurant, maybe on downtown on Spruce or some of those others.
Yeah, you're welcome to use the space that's immediately, you know, in front of your building. So like I said, if you have a 50-foot frontage, then, you know, you can use that area in front of your building for outdoor seating.
But if it's a private parking lot, they have to get permission from their landlord and so forth? Okay. All right, so I got clarification from Lane Landreth for the city that alleys would likely be only in the evenings and weekends when not in use by delivery trucks as well. So just wanted to answer that. There's a question about public access bathrooms. What needs to be considered for enlarged outdoor spaces? Do they need to provide bathrooms and sinks? I think there was just a couple questions about that.
So again, I think we were envisioning that the individual restaurants, facilities would service the patrons that are utilizing their outdoor spaces. I don't think we envisioned any shared portable facilities or anything of that nature.
So the state said they would allow a well-marked barrier for the extended exterior outdoor licensing, pretty much anything beyond sidewalk chalk. Is that true for the City of Boulder as well? Is there a guideline for the barrier?
What we have said in the city emergency rule that it needs to be a combination of 3-foot planters, 3-foot fencing, something like that. That's our definition of containment. We wanted to be somewhat clear, believing that 3-foot like snow fence or something like that was easier to obtain than 4-foot or 5-foot or 6-foot fencing. But it does need to be a fence. It can be a combination of planters or something that creates that containment, which will be very clear to the state that you're responsible for the inside and not responsible for the outside area. So,
okay. So this process is called retail restaurant right-of-way. And we have a couple retailers that have asked questions as to, they understand the original recommendation was to allow retail to take advantage of this as well as restaurants. That's still the case. And how will this benefit retailers?
Again, our focus in the short term was really on restaurants in order to respond to council directive as well as the state's recent guidance that's been provided. We'll need to seek a little bit more guidance on, retail sidewalk sales and things like that. I don't have a response for that at this moment.
Okay. What if there is an alley between the private parking lot and the physical location of the restaurant? No liquor service, but would food service be okay?
Yes.
So the guidance for under the state order said that there's no self-seating, and specifically in reference to restaurants. If we apply for outdoor seating space, is self-seating allowed? Or do we still have to follow that no self-seating strict rule for indoor and out?
Yeah, I don't think there's any self-seating allowed. So we can certainly ask that question. It feels like that, even though that is listed under the indoor bullet, I feel like a lot of the things that they've talked about apply for anywhere that you're having patrons. So
could you go over some of the options that, some businesses have thought about for, getting around some of that self-seating issues if they're not used to, placing people at a seat?
I don't know that we have a list of creative ideas, but I think certainly thinking of businesses like our fast casual places who don't traditionally have seating, assignments and things like that. You certainly need to limit the access to certain tables so that you can have adequate spacing. You could certainly provide numbers. So as people order, you give them the number of the table they need to sit at, something like that. So that doesn't necessarily require you to add a lot of new staff in roles that you don't have already, but you do need to address all the bullets in the requirements there. So how you can be creative, we certainly support that, but it doesn't allow for you to not follow these things because you just don't normally have people to do that.
Okay. So Charles, a clarification question. So if you have a closed street next to you and you apply for the sidewalk, can you use the street as well, or do you have to add that to your application?
You can use both. They would both need to be part of your application.
So you would have to apply for both the sidewalk and the street if that street's closed.
Under one application, yeah.
Okay. So Mashawn, would drive-in options be allowed under liquor modifications? Think Sonic, but with beer or only at tables?
Truthfully, I don't know the answer to that question. And so I would be fine with posing that question to the State Liquor Enforcement Division, or taking the application and sending the State Liquor Enforcement Division the application right away. And if the state division said, yeah, no cars are going to be involved in this, then the applicant would need to amend their application to meet the state's guidance. But quite honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. It's an unknown question, I think, for the state. But quite honestly, it seemed like the state was willing and open to taking applications and sort of looking at them on a case-by-case basis and figuring out if they could, work with applicants so that it could comply. I mean, the state wasn't just right out of the box saying, no, no, no. I mean, they were saying, well, that's interesting. We'd have to look at if there's a way to make that work, So I think that that's the only way that I truthfully can answer it. So.
Okay, so, for this, we'll download all these questions, and anything that wasn't answered, we'll try. You guys can look for answers or get back to the audience. And that leads me to my next question, Charles. How soon can you get back to the retail community on their questions and concerns? Can we do a follow-up call to address retailers?
From what I understand, we're going to try to reconvene this afternoon to hammer that out. So soon. And yes, happy to follow up with anyone who has questions.
We also have a retail call with on Thursday that we already have established with Boulder County Public Health that we may be able to give some updates. Lane from the City of Boulder wrote that City of Boulder parking and access is allowing 10-minute loading and pickup zones at all on-street parking. Will not ticket until after the shopper has had at least 10 minutes to do their retail transactions. So that's just a piece to keep in mind for retailers.
Yeah, I was going to mention that there's designated loading zones downtown to help support that.
To keep with the curbside and some of those, the loading and that. All right, will the city council have a definitive answer this evening to which streets will be closed so we can proceed with the application process?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and we'll get that information out as soon as it's available. We'll try to get the information on the streets out. All right, so someone said we have a patio on Pearl Street. We would like to expand to the middle section of Pearl Street, which would be on the other side of the main walking area of Pearl Street. Is that okay to have a walkway through the area we would be serving? So they would have a walkway between what they're
Maybe
serving.
two different answers. So for the liquor license, so long as it's in adjacency and you don't have vehicle traffic driving through that no man's land, that's okay. For liquor service, it would be okay. There would be additional requirements for the liquor licensee, i.e. They could not allow the liquor licensees to walk their own alcohol over there. So the patron would need to go sit at their table, and then they would need to supply food and beverage service, wait staff, all of that into that center area. It would essentially, patrons couldn't walk across the area which is not part of their licensed premise themselves with a glass of beer or wine in their hand. They would need to provide table service to sit down diners. So.
Okay. So I think the question is how quickly will applications be processed? So Charles, if you could go through that one more time, and then Michonne, maybe on your side, how quickly they'll be processed.
So 3-day maximum, and that includes a concurrent review with liquor license modification, if that's what it is that you're applying for. But again, the construct is very prescriptive, so that you're giving us an application and you're really agreeing to abide by the standards, and we're gonna let you go ahead and get started. So technically 3 days, but once you submit your application, we're not asking you to wait to start making improvements to accommodate outdoor seating. We'll have an inspector come out shortly after your application is submitted and make sure that everything is above board and you're not obstructing any storm drainage, inlets, things like that. So technically 3 days, but once you submit the application and acknowledge to comply with the standards, you can get to work.
Okay. So there's a question that kind of builds on a previous question. So could a business on Pearl partner with a non-Pearl business to sell non-liquor licensed items to benefit both businesses? So we already got the answer on the liquor side, but could they partner for non-liquor items to benefit both?
Are we talking about restaurants, or are we talking about retailers?
I think this comes back to that restaurant piece, you know, a tented restaurant, non-liquor, maybe retailers.
Yeah, again, I think really the intent was for individual restaurant operators to have additional outdoor seating opportunities adjacent immediately to their actual structure.
Okay. And if it is a restaurant that would be serving someplace else, would that trigger something in their restaurant licensing lane?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at not being accessing your licensed kitchen, that starts to trigger a lot of things. If you're now providing portable equipment and portable hand wash stations when you don't have access to all those. So again, I think that's the question about expanding your cooking outside from a restaurant to its immediate frontage already has some challenges, but then to move, across town or across towns definitely adds a lot of complexity. So we would certainly need to work with the municipalities if they are interested in that. And then we would need to probably review what you're proposing as far as what equipment you're bringing and whether that's food trucks or some other kind of temporary setups.
So what about bike lanes? Could we close a bike lane and use that space for tables?
I suppose that that's possible.
Like, how would liquor work with this situation?
For liquor, quite honestly, if planning and development services, says that usage of that city property is okay, so long as there is not a car driving through the area, the transit area that the server needs to take food and beverage from the bricks and mortar restaurant to the bike lane area, that's okay with us. It's just, for liquor licensing, to Lane's point from Boulder County Health, the further you get away from the bricks and mortar restaurant, the more difficult it is to show that you have proper means of control of that satellite area. And the more difficult it is to truthfully state, we know that it's pedestrian only in the entire connective area between the bricks and mortar restaurant and that satellite service area. The harder it gets to show that. If it's down the block face or, 2 blocks over or something, it just gets more difficult to truthfully say those things.
Hey, Corinne, I'm not sure we answered one of the questions. So I think the question was if you have 2 restaurants next door to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they're serving alcohol to their particular designated area,
Yeah.
but they want to cross-serve food to each other. Is that a violation of any of the permitting processes? I don't know if that's something that Lane can address, but just assume that there are 2 restaurants right next to each other that may want to offer both types of food, but they would stick to their own alcohol.
For the food side, I don't think we have concerns with that, but on the alcohol, they may. So if that starts to blur those lines, we wouldn't want to run afoul of other jurisdictions and other enforcement entities. So, but for us, we'd just be looking at the social distancing, if you've got servers that are overlapping. And so really it's more about the public health components of, are you maintaining social distance? Is there too much cross between the 2 facilities? But if you can maintain those, we certainly would be willing to look at it.
And actually, could I ask Lane a question? So is there concern over contact tracing? You would think that having control over the food that's being served to the patrons, you'd want to make sure that that was something that you were being pretty careful about. So I just was wondering if that would be an issue.
Our goal was to have places doing reservations, so you're not getting just walk up. So that will control a lot of that. How many people are showing up, not just having tons and tons of people walking in. And then those reservation lists can help serve as that contact tracing if an issue arose. But more so the reservations was to manage the volume of people that are showing up at any one time.
Thanks, that's helpful.
And for liquor licensing, it really depends on the class of license. If you have a hotel restaurant license, what your obligation is to be cooking meals for those patrons, right? And there are food percentages and you have to maintain foodstuffs and all of this. It's really a restaurant license, But if it were a brewery or a brew pub or a beer and wine or other classes of licenses, the food requirements and the specific requirements in the state code are lower than for hotel restaurants. But you know, I mean, the vast majority of the restaurants that we have in the city of Boulder hold hotel restaurant licenses. That's the class that they hold.
So we have, so just a clarification on a previous statement. How does this work with the to-go liquor situation? So people coming and getting curbside to-go liquor, does this impact that at all? And what needs to happen there?
Well, what we know thus far, right, for on-premise liquor licensees, the state has changed rules such that if you are either delivering a food order or a customer is picking up a food order, even though you're an on-premise licensee, you can also allow, you know, sealed containers of your alcohol to go along with that food order. Thus far, what we've heard from the State Liquor Enforcement Division is that's valid until May 30. You know, the deputy director of the state division intimated that that's likely to be extended, but you know, we kind of don't know about those extensions until we know. And sometimes we do, sometimes we know the day of expiration, sometimes we know the next day. And so I guess I don't anticipate that. I mean, of the 3 applications that we've received thus far, quite honestly, liquor licensees are being pretty intentional. They have an expansion area, and then they also have a takeout pickup area, which is separate. So it depends on, you know, and I would assume they probably would have signage to specify, you go through this door for pickup orders, you go through this door if you're, you know, checking into our outdoor patio, those types of things. So
a person couldn't get to-go liquor and then just sit in the outdoor seating area to consume it?
no, to-go liquor is sealed, it has a sticker on it, all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question, I think, Lane, you might have to come in on this one. So right now, bars that don't have food service cannot open. But should bars that don't have their own kitchen, this is for Charles and you, so should they apply now knowing that they'll most likely open in the future, or that they might partner with somebody that can provide the food? So that might be Charles, and then I have a second part to that.
Yeah, I think we would need to seek additional guidance from the state as to whether or not, you know, that's something that would be supportable. But in the event that the state provides that guidance, then yeah, absolutely.
And one of our attendees said that on a call with the city of Denver, it was clarified that bars that do not have kitchens can partner with nearby restaurants, food trucks to provide food service to their guests, thus allowing them to reopen. The caveat is that their staff, not the guests nor a third-party delivery service, must serve the food to them. Is this something that the city of Boulder or Boulder County supports?
If that's guidance from the state.
Lane?
Yeah, right now the state doesn't provide that. We've asked those clarifying questions because they specifically called out bars as being closed. So I certainly would support that change if the state puts it forward. But right now, I think it reads that all bars must remain closed to in-person patrons. Takeout is permitted. Beer sales and cocktail kits can be sold from breweries, but it says they must remain closed. So, but certainly if you can adhere to all the other requirements that restaurants are for in-person dining, I don't have an issue with that. But unfortunately, right now, the state has prohibited that.
Okay. And Lane, one more. I think there was a confusion about your reservations comment. Are reservations mandated, or is that just something that was in the previous version of the order that was now a recommendation?
Yeah, and I don't think it was a requirement in the previous recommendation, but I think it is a best practice, because it's otherwise I think you're going to really struggle with maintaining large crowds waiting to try to get in, you know, to your facility, especially as things expand out into the sidewalks and the streets. And then also then really difficulty maintaining some pedestrian walkway that allows for social distancing. So, but it was not a requirement. It's just an encouragement to have reservations. So you need to have some way to reduce congregation of people. And so that was one of the main recommendations where that's a feasible option for you.
And it helps with contact tracing as well.
Yeah, I think it helps you manage a lot of things, and it helps us as well.
Okay. When should we expect clarification about sharing food from neighboring restaurants to help reopen bars?
I would love to see that today, but I have no idea when we're going to see that. So
I feel like I keep asking you guys to have a crystal ball in some ways, but we'll push it out as soon as you guys get the answer on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions out there? Right now, we've answered about 44, 45, 46 questions. So great job in 1 hour. Again, your plan is to make this go live, the application go live sometime this evening. We will send out a link to everybody that was on this webinar as well as other restaurants. You'll have some information going out. And then it includes the information on the liquor licensing. We'll also include a link to the restaurant guidelines and requirements from the state that were distributed today to the restaurants. But if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to pass it back to John.
Hey, Corinne, can I just add one thing? So
Yeah.
I know this has come up in the past. Boulder County Public Health is not doing any approval for the ordinance that goes into effect tomorrow. So all the indoor dining and outdoor dining, those requirements have been posted. We've worked collaboratively with the Chamber and Economic Development folks to do a session earlier today. So you can watch that recorded viewing if you have further questions, but you do not need to get a prior approval to open tomorrow. So that is not something that we're doing. You just need to adhere to the requirements.
And I'll just close with a couple thank yous. So just to be very clear, first of all, thank you to the staff team. It has been a partnership. They've worked very closely, not just with the Boulder Chamber, but with the entire business response group, in particular downtown Boulder. Want to recognize them for their work with the city staff. But the city staff has worked very hard to put these regulations in place through the moving target of the state authorization. So appreciate that. Also, Lane from Public Health, appreciate your partnership throughout. And then just to the restaurants, we are with you. This is so important to us, our community, your partners, your friends. We want you open. We want you serving our community, and we want you to thrive. So this is just the first step in that process. We'll take feedback from you through the Boulder Chamber, through obviously the city as well, to see how it's going and how we can make improvements to better support you. So this is the start of the process. We look forward to working with you, and let's get going.
Thank you.